One of the best things Better Call Saul has given us is the McGill brothers. Rarely on television have we ever seen a relationship so layered, so mutually destructive, so divisive, and at the same time, so real. In the first 3 seasons, it was amazing to watch these two brothers bring out the worst in each other, but also on rare occasion, the best. So what went wrong exactly? Was Chuck a villain that created impossible standards for Jimmy, causing him to slip into his old ways and eventually rise again as Saul Goodman? Or did Chuck just accurately predict Jimmy's future because he knew his younger brother? The truth is that each of these characters told themselves a story and lived according to that narrative. As a result, at every turn, they each proved the other's story true, further pitting themselves against each other. If Jimmy believes the world is out to keep him down, when Chuck undermines his career, he shows Jimmy that it's true. Jimmy can work hard to become a lawyer and prove himself, but it's not enough. HHM will still keep him out. Jimmy's story of a world intent on limiting his success proves real. So instead of following the straight and narrow, Jimmy takes shortcuts, thereby proving Chuck's story true, that his younger brother is and will always be a con man and a danger to the law. So Chuck doubles down, further proving himself the adversary in Jimmy's story. But where did all this start? It seems that much of it can be traced back to Charles McGill Sr., their father. He ran a small corner store in Cicero that ultimately went out of business. Why? He was too kind and often taken advantage of. In a flashback, we see a man scam Jimmy's father with a sob story about a sick kid. Even as a child, Jimmy sees it for what it is and warns his father that the man is lying to take advantage of him. But Charles won't hear of it and scrambles to help the man. In the meantime, the grifter gives Jimmy some advice.
There are wolves and sheep in this world, kid. Figure out which one you're gonna be.
It seems that Jimmy decides he'll be a wolf, because moments later, he steals cash from the till. And if we're to believe Chuck, this became a habit for Jimmy, slowly embezzling $14,000 over the years. That's the story Chuck tells himself, which he shares with Kim. He tells her that after Jimmy stole so much from their father, he was forced to sell the store, and 6 months later, he was dead. In Chuck's story, Jimmy is unequivocally the bad guy. He killed their father. But not only that, despite his misdeeds, everyone still loved Jimmy. When Chuck tried to warn their father of Jimmy's thievery, he wouldn't hear it. Not his Jimmy. And their mother Ruth seemed to also be under Jimmy's spell. Years later, as she lay on her deathbed with Chuck by her side, it wasn't his name she called out with her dying breaths. It was Jimmy's, the son who wasn't there when she died because he was out picking up hoagies. It's easy to see how Chuck could come to resent Jimmy and maybe even feel a little jealous for the seemingly constant affection he received. Even when Jimmy met Rebecca, Chuck's wife, the two of them quickly hit it off, laughing the night away at lawyer jokes, laughing at Chuck's expense. And later, when Chuck tried to tell his own lawyer joke, it landed with a thud. By this point in Chuck's life, Jimmy had proven himself a degenerate. Time and time again, Chuck was forced to bail him out of trouble, but somehow, his troublemaker of a brother seemed to be a Svengali. Everyone loved Jimmy, and no one could see him for what he really was. Sitting at the dinner table, watching his wife fall under Jimmy's spell, watching him do something that Chuck cannot, be jovial, charming, and funny, that is not a comfortable place for Chuck. But when Jimmy is screwing up, when he's a drunk mess for example, that is more comfortable. Those are the occasions when Jimmy is unmistakably lower than Chuck, and he can hold on to the sense of superiority he thinks he deserves. In season 1, for example, Chuck takes care of a drunk Jimmy, and in that moment, you can feel the love from Chuck. He's taking care of his little brother. Or think of the closest we ever saw them. In the season 4 finale, Winner, Chuck vouches for his brother in front of the bar committee. After the swearing-in ceremony, they celebrate. Jimmy goads Chuck onto the karaoke stage for a duet of ABBA's The Winner Takes It All. It's quickly clear that Chuck is the superior singer, and he soon grabs the mic to turn a duet into a solo. Now, he's in his happy place, where he is the superior brother. That continues when he brings a drunken Jimmy home. This is a Jimmy who can hardly function, a Jimmy who needs help from someone better than himself. In this scenario, Chuck is fully comfortable with his younger brother, and neither of them, not even Chuck himself, are necessarily aware of this dynamic. All they know is that for this night, they are getting along, just like brothers should.
Building me a home, thinking I'd be strong.
But in the cold light of day, Chuck realizes with horror what is happening. Slippin' Jimmy is going to be a lawyer. In good conscience, he cannot allow that to happen. The law is too sacred. He can't stop it entirely, but he can at least slow Jimmy down. So he tells Howard to ensure that HHM will not allow Jimmy to work there as a lawyer. Now, this is where things get complicated. The law is too sacred to be desecrated by Slippin' Jimmy narrative is what Chuck tells himself. But this is simply his interpretation of the thing he's feeling, which is that Jimmy cannot be a lawyer. Where is that feeling really coming from? Chuck's story is that Jimmy is a delinquent who never pays the price and always gets more than he deserves. The adoration of everyone around him. It's not fair. But at least there is one thing Chuck could accomplish that Jimmy never could. Chuck became a successful lawyer, something that required intelligence and a lot of hard work. To suddenly find that Jimmy is going to be a lawyer too? The resentment which grew in Chuck, watching his younger brother break the rules but still come out ahead time and time again, that resentment comes back with ferocity when Jimmy has the gall to become a lawyer. Chuck was not going to allow that to happen. This is a good place to check on Jimmy's story, which starts in the same place. Charles McGill Sr. ran a corner store, but he suffered one fatal flaw. He was too nice. In Chuck's story, the next sentence is, so Jimmy was able to rob him blind. But Jimmy tells a different story. He spent a lot of time in that store, watching his father get taken advantage of time and time again. That grifter told him they lived in a world of wolves and sheep. Well, over the years, that was certainly proven to him. In a Season 3 flashback, we actually hear Jimmy's recollection of events as he recounts them to Marco. His parents worked hard for the store, but his father didn't have it in him to do what was necessary. All his hard work led to nothing because he was too nice, always giving things away to anyone with a sob story. If he wanted the store to succeed, he could have sold beer and cigarettes to the kids from Mary Margaret's, but he was never going to do what he needed to do. In this story, the only mention Jimmy makes of stealing from his father is the occasional rare coin, which he stuck in the ceiling in a familiar Band-Aid box for good luck. Did Jimmy really steal $14,000 from his father? Or is that just Chuck's assumption because he wasn't there? Maybe that $14,000 includes all the money and goods that their father gave away. In any case, the truth doesn't really matter. All that matters is the stories Jimmy and Chuck tell themselves. In Jimmy's case, the narrative is that his father was a saint. He did the right thing. He worked hard, and in the end, he had nothing to show for it. He should have taken the shortcut and done what was necessary, selling beer and cigarettes to kids who couldn't get it anywhere else. Jimmy was not going to make the same mistake as his father, so he did what was necessary and took shortcuts. Working with Marco, grifting became a way of life. Not because he was a bad person, but because the world was full of wolves. If he didn't take advantage of them, he would be a sheep like his father, and they would take advantage of him. Chuck may or may not be right on the sum total of how much Jimmy stole from their father, but his primary conclusion, that Jimmy is a con man, ultimately proves accurate, because that's exactly what Jimmy becomes. Jimmy lives according to his story and inadvertently reaffirms Chuck's. The stage is set for a silent war between the two of them, though sadly, Jimmy is blissfully unaware of it. Sure, he knows that his older, successful brother looks down on him and hates bailing him out, but Jimmy would never dream that Chuck is jealous of him and has no appreciation for the true depth of Chuck's resentment. So, although the world may be an antagonistic place where you need to take from others and keep one eye open, lest they take from you first, Jimmy can at least count on the one other living member of his family. He can count on Chuck. After all, they are brothers and need to take care of each other. Jimmy would of course do everything he could to take care of Chuck after his breakdown, going out of his way to regularly deliver supplies and make sure he's okay. From the way he barges into the hospital to shut the lights off after Chuck gets tased, you can tell Jimmy has real concern for his brother. He really cares. In his mind, Chuck has been nothing but supportive. He got him a job in the HHM mailroom, he vouched for him at the swearing-in ceremony, and Howard is the one who kept him out of HHM, not Chuck. Before we move on, we should talk about Chuck's ailment, his electromagnetic hypersensitivity. Although ambiguous at first, it is eventually proven beyond a shadow of a doubt that the illness is in his mind. We also see evidence that it worsens when Jimmy acts out of line, like his billboard scheme, and it improves when they get along. In Season 1, when Jimmy and Chuck work together on the Sandpiper case, Chuck spends time outdoors for the first time in years. The more Chuck is alienated from the few people he has personal relationships with, the more his ailment acts up. In fact, it started shortly after his wife Rebecca left him, and with Rebecca out of the picture, we never see any evidence that Chuck has other personal relationships besides Jimmy. Maybe Howard to some extent, but even when it comes to Howard, their relationship is mostly based on work. So with Rebecca gone, and with Chuck's deep-seated resentment for Jimmy, he is essentially entirely alone. How does Chuck cope with that? Especially considering he has a very hard time ever admitting fault. That's what made it so impossible for him to move on after Jimmy altered the Mesa Verde documents in Season 2. Chuck is all alone, but unable to self-reflect and look inside himself to see where he went wrong. Jimmy went decades doing the wrong thing and never paying the price. Meanwhile, Chuck has done nothing wrong. He built a great career where he gets to valiantly defend the law, so why now is the world punishing him? Why does he have to be alone? There's no way he did anything wrong, yet for some reason, his life is unraveling. That massive cognitive dissonance broke him, and his mind resolved it by concocting this ailment. With an allergy to electricity, Chuck's problem becomes externalized. He doesn't have to look within himself to see why he's alone. He doesn't have to discover the resentment for Jimmy that he's been holding on to for years. He doesn't have to confront the fact that he's built no life for himself outside HHM. He doesn't have to do any of that, because none of that is the problem. The problem is electromagnetic hypersensitivity. To cure it, Chuck would have to resolve the real issue, his estrangement from Jimmy. And the more he pushes Jimmy away, the worse his issue is going to get. In fact, the last time they talk, Chuck says the most hurtful thing he can possibly think of to Jimmy.
But the truth is, you've never mattered all that much to me.
And it's shortly after that when Chuck has his breakdown, ending with his death. Before that, Jimmy lets slip to the malpractice insurance company that Chuck recently had a meltdown in court. This leads to massively increased insurance premiums at HHM, and it leads to Howard forcing Chuck into retirement. Chuck lost his life's work in HHM, leaving him with nothing. Then he finally severed his one remaining familial relationship. The way to cure this disease is to reconcile with Jimmy. By doing the exact opposite, it instead takes root and kills him. Returning to Jimmy's story, there's an important flashback in Season 1. Like their experiences with Charles McGill Sr., this is another shared moment which sends both their stories in very different directions. Chuck visits Jimmy in jail, where Jimmy begs his older brother to help bail him out after the Chicago sunroof incident, the one which almost landed him on the sex offender list. In this scene, Jimmy admits he's been a lousy brother, and that if he was a better person, he'd stop letting Chuck and himself down. He promises he will. He's going to do better and make them both proud. In Chuck's story, this is one of a million examples of Jimmy saying whatever he needs to say to get out of a jam. He needs Chuck's help, and will say whatever is necessary to get it. So it changes nothing. He's still slipping Jimmy, and of course, Chuck will not allow him to be a lawyer, and certainly not at HHM. In Jimmy's story, this is the beginning of a genuine attempt at redemption and recovery. When Jimmy talks to Chuck in a moment of desperation, needing his help, it's hard to take him at his word. Maybe he is just saying whatever he needs to say. But as we see in a later flashback, the first place Jimmy goes after getting out of jail is to see Marco and say goodbye. to let him know he's leaving Cicero and heading to New Mexico with Chuck. With Marco, Jimmy has no reason to do anything but tell the truth, and he tells Marco,
"It's time to make some changes. It's time to grow up."
When Marco insists Jimmy is only leaving because of Chuck, Jimmy responds,
"All right, Chuck's not making me do this. He's given me an opportunity, and I'm grabbing it."
Then Jimmy leaves for Albuquerque, leaving Marco and slipping Jimmy behind in Cicero. Chuck gets him a job in the HHM mailroom, and Jimmy makes a genuine attempt at turning his life around. He makes friends at work, and he works hard. Howard even took to calling him Charlie Hustle. And at this point, Chuck is actually proud of Jimmy. He left a letter for his younger brother to be read after his passing. In it, he tells Jimmy how proud he is. But from the letter, we can tell it was written before Jimmy became a lawyer. It was written while Jimmy was still firmly beneath Chuck. Chuck is a great lawyer, while Jimmy just works in the mailroom. As we've seen, that's when Chuck is at his most comfortable. Working in the mailroom, Jimmy has ambitions for more. He wants to be the best he can be. He wants to be a good person, so he models himself after the best person he knows, Chuck, the older brother he looks up to. So Jimmy's going to be a lawyer, just like him. In secret, he attends a correspondence school and studies for the bar, which after 3 attempts, he finally passes. Now, things start to get uncomfortable for Chuck. He may have gotten used to Jimmy in the mailroom, but the resentment was still there. He still hated the way Jimmy could hold anyone in his sway. But at least Chuck was a lawyer and Jimmy wasn't. He certainly had that over him. Not anymore. So, when Jimmy surprises his older brother with the news that he's going to be a lawyer, the fear and disappointment on Chuck's face is clear. He has to feign pride, but it is unmistakably phony. Though Jimmy himself still doesn't realize that. Chuck is still the supportive older brother. Through Howard, Chuck blocks Jimmy's attempts to work at HHM, and he becomes the back-of-a-nail salon public defender we met in Season 1. Barely getting by and desperate to catch a break, Jimmy starts to relapse. He pulls out some slip-in Jimmy tactics when he tries to sign the Kettlemans, or when he fakes his heroism on the billboard. Once again, Chuck's story reinforces itself. His belief that Jimmy could not change sent his brother to a point of desperation where he does in fact backslide. Chuck thinks that Slippin' Jimmy is still around, and then he sees the billboard stunt in the paper proving that he is. Meanwhile, Jimmy is still unaware of his older brother's contempt for him and doesn't realize just how deep the resentment goes. So, when they work together on the Sandpiper case, in Jimmy's story, things are better than ever. The McGill brothers are working together as lawyers, and Jimmy is staying on the straight and narrow. But soon, Chuck and Jimmy's stories finally collide. With a major lawsuit, Sandpiper going to HHM with Jimmy, Jimmy is about to be not just a lawyer, but a successful one, with an office right next to Chuck's. And it all happens so quickly. It isn't fair. Chuck worked hard his whole life to get where he is, and now Jimmy gets to just luck his way into this position? Of course, we saw Jimmy work hard for this, putting himself through school, literally digging through the dumpster, but in Chuck's mind, this is the equivalent of training all your life for a race, only to see your opponent win by cheating. The resentment returns with a fury. So much so, Chuck handles an electric device, Jimmy's phone, so he can call Howard and make sure he does not allow Jimmy to work at HHM, no matter what, even if it means not taking the surefire Sandpiper case. When Jimmy realizes the truth, it is a massive betrayal by Chuck. Heartbroken, he heads back to Cicero to see Marco, where for a week, he fully relapses into Slippin' Jimmy as they go on a grifting bender. It all ends with Marco's death, but with his dying breath, he tells Jimmy that he's just had the greatest week of his life. The love Jimmy never got from Chuck, he suddenly found in Marco. Where the straight and narrow path led only to rejection, the Slippin' Jimmy path led to acceptance. So when Kim offers Jimmy a way back to the straight and narrow, he doesn't take it. She talks Jimmy up and fights to earn him a job offer at Davis & Maine, another firm HHM has contracted to help with the Sandpiper case, meaning Jimmy would get to work on it after all. But we see him fiddle with Marco's ring, a silent way to tell us Jimmy is thinking about Marco. He's thinking about how the legitimate route only leads to rejection, but as Slippin' Jimmy, he did find acceptance. So he's going to go the Slippin' Jimmy route. He rejects the job offer. Not only that, but he talks to Mike about how they held $1.6 million in their hands, the Kettleman's stolen money, and didn't take a penny of it. No one knew they had it. They could have easily gotten away with splitting it 50-50. Why didn't they?
I know what stopped me. And you know what? It's never stopping me again.
Chuck told himself that Jimmy's recovery attempt was not genuine. Then, he betrayed his younger brother, and as a result, Jimmy abandoned that attempt at recovery. Once again, Chuck's story twists Jimmy's to ultimately prove itself correct. In Chuck's narrative, Jimmy is the bad guy, and now that will prove to be true more than ever, when Jimmy sabotages Chuck's Mesa Verde documents, humiliating him in court. Meanwhile, in Jimmy's world, the idea that he will only be accepted as a con man continues to be reinforced, first by Marco and then by Kim. His relationship with her only becomes real after he invites her into one of his schemes, when they swindle their way into a free bottle of Zafiro Añejo, and the pattern continuously repeats. When they stop talking for a time, they only come back together when they grift another mark into writing a $10,000 check to Ice Station Zebra Associates. The takeaway is clear. Jimmy will take shortcuts, he will manipulate people, and do whatever it takes to get ahead. He tried to do the right thing, and the world rejected him. So, he'll show them. He'll show Chuck. What happens when Jimmy finally wins? After years of Chuck sabotaging Jimmy's career, Jimmy turned it around on him. He humiliated Chuck at the bar hearing, publicly proving that his ailment is in his mind, and for a moment, Chuck's resentment finally comes out.
He'll never change. Ever since he was 9, always the same. Couldn't keep his hands out of the cash drawer. But not our Jimmy. Couldn't be precious Jimmy. Stealing them blind. And he gets to be a lawyer? What a sick joke!
He shouts not about the sanctity of the law, but about how Jimmy shouldn't get to be a lawyer. This, coupled with Jimmy's meddling with the insurance, effectively ended Chuck's career as a lawyer. After that, Kim nearly died in a car accident, which puts things in perspective for Jimmy. He realizes we have limited time on this earth, and does he really want to spend the rest of his life hating Chuck? He doesn't. So he visits his brother to try and make amends. It doesn't work. This is when Chuck tells Jimmy, "The truth is you've never mattered all that much to me." That will be the last time they ever speak. Throughout season 4, Jimmy doesn't seem to be all that bothered by Chuck's death, which greatly disturbs Kim. All season, she waits for Jimmy to grieve in a way that makes sense for her. She even asks Jimmy to see a therapist, because the way he is acting just doesn't make sense to her. But the truth is that Jimmy was definitely rattled by Chuck's death. After he learns of it, he stays up all night just staring and processing. He hardly speaks before, during, or after the funeral, until something happens. Howard confesses that he believes Chuck's death was no accident. After the insurance issue, Howard forced him into retirement. Then, Chuck took his own life. Jimmy responds,
Well, Howard, I guess that's your cross to bear.
And suddenly, the old Jimmy is back. We see him smile for the first time since Chuck's death, and from that point on, we see no outward signs of grief. In that moment, Jimmy learns that he was a large part of driving Chuck to suicide. In a final screw you to his older brother, Jimmy told the insurance company about Chuck's meltdown in court, and caused those premiums to go up, which caused Howard to force the retirement. That is a lot of guilt to process, and it would be a painful process. Jimmy decides not to do it, and it seems like a very intentional decision. There's no need to suddenly feed the fish or make coffee, but Jimmy suddenly goes and does those things, because he's decided not to feel that guilt or remorse. So he makes a show of it. I just learned my brother committed suicide, but look how okay I am. I'm feeding the fish, making coffee, and whistling happily. But soon, he doesn't have to fake it, because his compartmentalization takes root, and those feelings are sufficiently stuffed down so Jimmy is protected from them. So much so that he is blinded to some obvious realities. When he reads Chuck's final letter to her, he can't understand why Kim is so upset.
Hey. No, I didn't mean to make it.
No, it's okay. It's a nice letter.
When he finds Howard suffering from insomnia, he asks,
What's eating you?
The reason why Kim and Howard are hurting is obvious, but Jimmy just can't see it because he has so firmly cemented those feelings away from himself. This experience is an important step in transforming Jimmy into Saul because it gives him practice pouring cement into his soul. For Jimmy McGill to become Saul Goodman, the kind of lawyer who could suggest Walt kill his brother-in-law as a precautionary measure, Jimmy has to be able to live without guilt. That may be the final thing that Chuck taught Jimmy, because that's what we see in Season 4. Jimmy learns that he can shut that feeling down and keep it there. That becomes a superpower for him, which he will need as Saul Goodman. How else could he be fine working with drug dealers and killers? But there are cracks in the cement. Some of those feelings do slip through after Jimmy is pushed enough. In the Season 4 finale, he is forced to show remorse for Chuck if he has any hope of the bar reinstating him as a lawyer. So he attends a scholarship meeting in Chuck's name where they vote on its recipient. Jimmy is the only one in the room who votes for Christy Esposito. Everyone else passes on her thanks to a black mark on her record. She shoplifted once. In this scene, Jimmy is forced to watch a room of stuffed shirts judge Christy and deny her any forgiveness for past transgressions. They give her the same treatment Chuck gave him. All the while, a portrait of the man stares down at him. Finally, Jimmy cracks. He runs after the girl to tell her what happened. They, not just the scholarship board, but everyone, will never forgive her. They will always keep her down, but it doesn't matter because she doesn't need them. She's not going to follow the rules, she'll cut corners, and do whatever it takes to outdo them.
They're on the 35th floor. You're going to be on the 50th floor. You're going to be looking down on them. You make them suffer.
Jimmy is ostensibly handing out life advice, but in reality, he's talking about Chuck. That becomes clear in the closing of this speech.
You don't matter all that much to them. So what? So what? Screw them. Remember, the winner takes it all.
You don't matter all that much to them is Jimmy throwing Chuck's final words back in his face when he told Jimmy, "You've never mattered all that much to me." And of course, the winner takes it all is the song they sang together the night of his swearing in. Chuck has turned Jimmy into an angry and spiteful person. He's no longer just looking to get by or have a good time as Slippin' Jimmy. Now, he's a bit more ambitious. In a world of wolves and sheep, Jimmy learned that the wolves are intent on making sure he stays a sheep. Screw him. He's not just going to be a wolf, he's going to be the wolf, the one who makes the rest of them look like sheep. In the next scene, Jimmy weeps. Some of those feelings he sealed away months earlier managed to crop up. His rant to Christy made him realize who he became thanks to Chuck, a cynical and bitter person. But at the bar hearing later that episode, he rediscovers himself in a new light. He tells them about how he spent his whole life trying to make Chuck proud, but he could never be as good as him. But he can try, and if they let him be a lawyer again, that's what he'll do. He'll do everything in his power to be worthy of the name McGill. And only minutes later, he sheds that name in favor of Goodman. Jimmy gave the performance of a lifetime in that hearing, and he pulled it off because some of those feelings were real. All he had to do was let them out a little. Then, as he looked at the wolves in front of him, who so respected his brother and saw how easily he could manipulate them, he relished it. He's on cloud 9 afterward. That's the life he wants to live. He's going to grab the system that tried so hard to keep him down and twist it to his desires. As Saul Goodman, he can do that. For Chuck, curing his illness would have required reconstructing his broken relationship with Jimmy, his family. For Jimmy, avoiding moral decay and giving up his con man ways would require him to let go of the betrayal he still feels from Chuck. Because right now, he doesn't just feel like Chuck betrayed him, but the whole world. That's what we hear in his speech to Christy when he vaguely refers to a they who will stop at nothing to keep her down, and tells her that he's not just talking about the scholarship, he's talking about everything. But for Jimmy to reconcile with Chuck's betrayal, he'd first have to deal with his guilt. He'd have to reconcile with the fact that he played a large role in Chuck taking his own life. Chuck may be gone, but the rot he left in Jimmy's soul remains. His lashing out at the world as Saul Goodman is truly him continuing to lash out against the specter of Charles McGill. He drove Chuck to an early grave, and Chuck drove him to a Cinnabon in Omaha, Nebraska. What happens next? Will Jimmy ever confront those emotions he locked away after Chuck's death? Well, We'll find out in the coming weeks. And with that, we are at the end of Saul Week. Thank you everyone who supported the channel this week, watching my daily Better Call Saul videos. This is easily one of my favorite shows of all time, and I'm so glad I was able to help commemorate and celebrate this series as it comes to a close. If you enjoyed this video, or any of the videos this week, and haven't done so already, please like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon for more. Just because Saul Week is over doesn't mean we're done talking about this show. You can expect many more videos like this one, and of course coverage of every episode as they air. So stay tuned. With that, thank you for watching, and see you on the next One Take.